Jefferson, Texas stands The Grove, called the most haunted home in the state. Its owner, Mitchel Whitington, has spent decades chasing ghosts and living with them. Today we step inside where the past is very much alive. All right, we are here with Mitchel Whitington. He has graciously allowed us to interview him in his reportedly haunted home, in his most haunted house in Texas, so they say.
How do you prove that, right? People say that all the time. We'll have a newspaper come do a story in the most haunted house in Jefferson or Texas or the South, and I'm like, there's no kind of way to differentiate, how do you know? But we do have a lot of weird things that happen here.
Awesome. Okay, well, yeah, let's start from the beginning. Where'd you grow up? Tell me about your childhood.
Just average middle-class family.
Yeah.
I was the only kid, and so it was, Hooks is like Jefferson. It's a nice little town, perfect place to grow up, leave it to Beaver, everything is like you would expect, and it was a wonderful childhood I had. Got to grow up next door to my grandparents. So I not only had mother and dad, but I had my grandparents, and that was a big influence on me. Granddad was a country preacher.
Can you tell me about maybe your first significant supernatural encounter and how old you were and all that?
Well, I can tell you about the first time where I actually vocalized something, and that was in first grade. We were in first grade, and probably a lot of people watching this will have no memory of this because they were, it moved on so quickly, but they used to have a thing called a memory graph machine, and you had a big drum, and you would run these papers off. This is before Xerox, right? And the papers, the ink was colorful. It was like purple or something, and the paper were always cool, and it smelled good. And Ms. Reed, my first grade teacher, passed out a line drawing of a chair, and she said, color it your favorite color. And so everybody's coloring it different colors, and in my mind I'm thinking, what's my favorite color? And I had this vision in my mind, and I have no idea where it came from, but of what I knew to be a haunted house. It was a house where ghosts lived, and I can see it in silhouette. And so it was, at night, and you could only see the outline of it, and it was black. So I colored but it always made me feel good. So I colored my chair black. And then Ms. Reed put them all up for parent-teacher night. And you've got green and red and all the colors of the rainbow. And, my parents came, and they're like, oh, that's your chair. And, black is your favorite color? And so I'm surprised they didn't take that as a sign of depression and throw me into therapy or something. But I answered them. I said, well, no, that's the color of haunted houses. But that's only because of this, picture in my mind that I held. And I had no idea where that came from. It was just there. So that's the first time I actually vocalized it. That was first grade.
Yeah, wow. Can you tell me later on, maybe another story leading up to what got you here?
So my wife and I got married, before going off to college, and got through school. I was a software engineer for a couple of decades, and she's always been in education. Now she's an LPC for the local school here, but licensed professional counselor. But she was teaching, and I'm working in the computer industry. So all of a sudden we had a little extra money to spend, and we'd go on vacations. And I was always the first one looking for, okay, what haunted inns can we stay at? What haunted restaurants can we go to? And we, that always became part of our travels. That poor woman, she put up with me all those years. So we actually got to visit a lot of the places that you hear about, watch on the ghost shows, like the Stanley Hotel and the Winchester House and the Myrtles and places like that. I got to go actually experience things and enjoy being there. And that kind of gave me the push to want to have an old home, haunted or not, because the older homes have so much history. And it's been such a pleasure the last 23 years living at the Grove, which was built in 1861. And I've gone back and looked at the history of everybody that's lived here. And so it's been fulfilling to me, I guess, on a level of my historical interest, because I do have two writing fields. I write about history and I write about haunted places. And this kind of checks both of those boxes, so.
Yeah, wow. So there wasn't any significant kind of progressional things that got you interested in the paranormal?
I just always have been.
He's always, okay. So
yeah, there was no road to Damascus thing
okay,
where,
Gotcha, okay. No waking up and you're levitating or anything?
Right. Nothing like that.
Yeah. I know Ouija boards are very popular and stuff like that. Did you ever try that or?
Well, yeah. Funny thing was, my parents were the sponsors for the youth group at church, and they're always looking for games and stuff. And so, yeah, they'd bought a Ouija board.
Yeah.
And of course now they're like, no, but back then it was, it's just a fun game. There's nothing to it. So.
Yeah. I know some people, they just, they laugh and they're like, nothing happened. I messed with it as a kid. Did you see anything or not really?
We had to, where everybody was sitting around, you put your fingers on the planchette and, it would move here and it would move there. And then immediately that degrades into, you're moving it. No, I'm not. Yes, you are, But any real spiritual experience with it, no.
No, okay. Any seances or anything, or?
Again, the kind of stuff you do as a kid.
Yeah, okay. So, nothing really popped up?
Nothing really significant happened. Right. It's just as we started traveling around and visiting places that had long supernatural histories, I guess. Yeah. We had things that happened in some of the places that made me go, wow, okay.
Yeah, so. Okay. Well, you want to lean into that?
Sure. Yeah. We went to Yellowstone, great place, and just had the best trip in the world, but we drove over to Cody, Wyoming, and I wanted to stay at the Irma Hotel. And Cody, Wyoming is named for Buffalo Bill Cody, and he had a Wild West show. Well, during the winters, he would put up in this little town, and he helped found the town, and it got named after him, Cody, Wyoming. So he had a hotel that he named after his daughter, Irma. So we thought, well, let's go there. So it's not too far from Yellowstone. It's an hour, something like that. And we got there, and we walked into the room, and another thing that I always insist on is, if I'm going to go to this place, that may be the only time in my life I get there. So I'm going to go full out, and so we got Colonel Cody's suite. This was his personal suite upstairs. And we opened the door, and Tammy said, this doesn't feel right. Something's wrong here. And I walked in, I'm like, no, everything's cool. No, what are you talking about? She goes, no. She goes, I don't feel like I'm welcome here. And I was like, oh, come on. We've been traveling. And so over the course of bringing our bags up and unpacking and kind of relaxing, weird things started happening. For example, she was taking a shower. She said, oh, we've been traveling all day. I'm just going to jump in the shower. Well, all of a sudden she screams, and the hot water had turned off, and she got blasted by cold. She's like, something turned the hot water off. And I was like, baby, these pipes are older than both of us put together. Come on, that's not a ghost stuff. Doors were opening and closing. We got a door slammed in our face, and pretty soon I'm like, there's something weird about this. Something is going on. But they had a big patio. So before we went to bed, we went out and we were sitting on the patio, and we'd snagged a bottle of wine, and we had a couple of plastic wine glasses. You have to make certain concessions when you're in Cody, Wyoming. So we went and bought the $1.95 plastic wine glasses, and we're just talking, and we're sitting there. I'm holding my glass, and she's holding hers, and right as I'm just talking to her right there, the glass gets slapped out of her hand. I mean, she didn't move her hand, she didn't throw it, it got knocked out and went skittering across the balcony. And she's like, that's it, I'm gone. And we're going somewhere else. I'm like, well, but baby, I don't know that there's any hotels in Cody, Wyoming other than this one. So I think we're kind of stuck here. She goes, I'm not. And I said, well, let me try something. So I went back inside, and I just started talking to the room. I was like, look, I don't know whoever's here and whoever's causing these problems for us, but we're only going to be here one night. We're leaving first thing in the morning. We don't mean any harm. We don't mean any disrespect. Could you please cut us a break and stop messing with my wife? And I went and told her, it's like, yeah, I don't know. We'll see. She came back in, and she's like, no, it actually feels different in here. Went on the rest of the evening with nothing else happening. Left the next morning. As I was leaving, I turned around and said, thank you to the room, And so that's always been a fun story to me, because I didn't feel anything weird. I didn't pick up on anything strange. I just saw a lot of the stuff happening. We were talking after the water thing happened in the shower. We're standing outside the bathroom and I'm trying to talk her down, like, that's just pipes. And then the faucet on the sink turns on and starts running high, and nobody's in there. I'm like, okay, I get it. So.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, that's fascinating. Yeah, I've never heard anybody ask the ghosts to be nice whenever they were spirits. So that's.
Oh, we talk to ours here all the time.
Yeah. Wow. Interesting. Was that one of your first hotel experiences?
It was. We also we went to Estes Park, Colorado. That's where the Stanley is.
Okay.
And it's really weird to me. Somebody that is around supernatural stuff all the time talks about it very calmly and casually. It's not a big woo-woo thing. Like I've got friends that live in different houses here in Jefferson. Jefferson's a very active town. I think it's because of the age of it and the old homes, and I think it retains a lot of memories. But anyway, I'm gonna run into them in the grocery store, and I go, "Yeah, what's happened at the Grove?" "Oh, well, this happened, this happened." And, "Oh, really? Here's what we had happen the other night." And it's just like you're talking about your kids, or your dogs or something like that. So we were at the Stanley, and we took their ghost tour, and there was the tour guide had been doing it for years, and she said, "Oh, we're going to go over to the concert hall." They had this was a huge resort back in the day, and she said, "Now there's the spirit of a little girl in this room, and she doesn't like the door being open." So, and the name escapes me. I'd have to look back at my notes. Let's call her Alice, just for sake of argument. She go, "Yeah, Alice just doesn't like the door open." And so she, there's several of us in the room, and the tour guide was talking and telling what they think happened to Alice to get her where she was. And so anyway, she's talking. She's like, turns around and says, "Alice, could you close the door?" And nobody's near the door, and it starts kind of weaving and then shuts. I'm like, "No way," And so she opened it back up. She said, "Yeah, ask her." And I was like, "Alice, could you shut that door?" And it starts and shuts. One of the other guys was like, "I got to call BS on this." And he goes over, he's rubbing all around. "How are y'all doing this?" And he finally said, "This is an ordinary door." She goes, "Yeah, Alice just doesn't like it shut." And everybody was, "How can you be so calm about that?" She goes, "I've been dealing with Alice for 10 years now," or whatever. And that's the way we feel about the spirits at the Grove. We've lived here for 23 years. And so, we have a fun relationship.
Interesting. Have you ever had any scary encounters?
I've only been frightened once. And I was writing a book called Ghost of East Texas in the Pineywoods. And down in Jacksonville, Texas, which is south of Tyler a little bit, there's a monument in a cemetery. And it marks the site of the Kilo massacre. The Kilo family, they had the worst Indian massacre in Texas history. The whole family was taken out. A lot of their friends were killed. And so they built a big pyramid-looking monument. That's not the right thing. An obelisk, I should say. And then they have a graveyard. So, and it's out in the middle of nowhere. So I went out there and I was going to write about it because there are some ghost stories about the place. So I'm walking around taking pictures and making notes. And, all of a sudden I felt like something doesn't feel right. And I thought, well, it's just my imagination. I'm in the middle of nowhere. I was certain that I was being watched, and I was certain that wherever I was in the cemetery, I just wasn't supposed to be there. So the stronger it got, the more I was starting to kind of freak out. I ended up thinking, well, I've got enough stuff here. Took out in a dead run, jumped in the car door, slammed it, hit the door lock, and I thought, what am I doing? The door lock, really? That's going to be... But anyway, I'd gotten enough. So the book came out, it was in there, and then I was speaking nearby, and I thought, oh, that's that turnoff road to go to the cemetery. I'll go back and see if I'm as freaked out. This time I got out, and I'm walking around, and it was like everything was fine, no problem. And I think, well, maybe there was an opinion that maybe I was going to write, exploitive things about it, or maybe they had no idea about my heart or my intent. So maybe that's why they were giving me such a rough time at that time. But back now, the book is there, and it's, I was very respectful. I'm always very respectful. I don't go to sensational stories and things like that, unless the story itself is sensational. But yeah, I don't try to make it scary or anything like that. But that's the one time I've really been frightened. But when I went back, everything was fine. So I kind of got validation that, okay, everything's still cool,
Were both visits during the day?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
Is there a story that, I don't know, is the most crazy to you that happened?
So the wildest story I have, for me anyway, was here at the Grove. We had only owned it for about a year, and we were just getting to know people in town and making friends. And we had been invited to a friend's house for, it was a surprise birthday party. It was a couple that had a bed and breakfast here in town. And the guy they were having a surprise birthday party for. So we were thrilled to be invited. We thought, oh, we'll meet some new people, And I said, what can we bring? And they said, whatever you want to, just some finger foods. And I thought, oh, cool, I'll bring chicken wings. I love chicken wings. And so I put them in the refrigerator to marinate overnight. I had some bourbon wings and some cola wings, and I think lemon pepper were the 3 I was taking. And I was marinating them overnight. And I bake wings or grill them. I don't deep fry them. Somehow I've convinced myself that makes them healthy. So I took them out and I opened the oven. And by the way, the guy that owned the house before us, he had a restaurant here for a number of years. And so the stove that was back there was a modern stove, but it had served as a restaurant stove. So it was beat to all heck. I mean, you know, he had cooked on it, nonstop and everything. So I opened the front door, you know, and I think, well, I'm going to warm it up before I put the wings in. So I closed it and put it on whatever temperature. Went away, got the wings put out on cookie sheets to put in and bake. And then I opened it up again, I put the wings in, and it's cold. I was like, what the heck? And then I remembered we had just had gas put back in that part of the house. It was there to the stove, but we added a gas heater and several things like that. But anyway, while they were doing their work, they shut the gas off. And that particular stove had a different pilot light for the top burners than it did for the stove itself. And I immediately went, oh, I bet they lit the one under the burners, but they didn't light the one for the stove. So I need to do that. So I got on my hands and knees and opened that bottom compartment. And the smell of gas just nearly knocked me over. And stoves have a safety feature, you know, if the pilot light's not lit, the gas won't flow. This was obviously broke on that stove because I'd been pumping that bottom thing full of gas here. And this is a part I'm not particularly proud of, but I thought, you know, if I got one of those wand lighters and I could get it back to that gas jet quick enough, I could go ahead and light that, which is the dumbest thing I've ever thought I've ever had in my life. I mean, that's ridiculous. Anyway, but I went and got this wand lighter. I get down on my hands and knees, and I got my flashlight, and I've got it shining right on where the pilot light is because I know I don't have much time. There's a lot of gas down there. So I laid the lighter on a shelf on the island in the middle of the kitchen so I could get it all lined up. And I said, okay. I reached back, and the lighter's gone. So I turned around. It's nowhere to be seen. Now, mind you, I hadn't got off my knees. I had it. I put it on the shelf. Now it's gone. So I start looking everywhere for it. I get up. I'm walking around. What the heck? And finally, Tammy came back, and she said, what are you doing? And I told her, and she's like, are you crazy? You can't do that. And I was like, I know, okay, well, help me find the lighter, and then we'll figure out the proper way to do it. So we couldn't find it anywhere. And then I had this idea, wait a minute, what if I light a taper candle off the top burner, because those were working, and then I use that to light the gas jet? Well, it had been 15 minutes, all that gas had dissipated. So I did that, I lit the gas jet down there, oven came on, cooked the wings, went to the party, everything was fine. A couple weeks later, we were having some friends over, and there's a big buffet in the dining room where we keep dishes and stuff. So Tammy was going to get out and set the table with something really nice. And she opened the door, and I heard her say, Mitch, you better come here. So I walked over there, and on top of a stack of plates was that lighter just laying there. And I hadn't seen it since it just went away. And nor had we gotten in there. That was where we keep the good china and stuff like that. So we hadn't opened it since then. And I just had to shake my head and go, that's pretty amazing. Now, the house probably, figured out that, we got an idiot that bought the place. We're gonna have to, so I could imagine in the ghost world, if we could look into it, they probably have a big whiteboard and all the spirits are there like, okay, you watch him from 8 to 10 and I'll watch him from 10 to 12. And we got to keep this guy from burning our house down. But my mind has to think that it like dematerialized and materialized. If I turned around, was it floating through the house? I don't know. I have no idea. I just know I set it on the shelf. It was behind the door in a cabinet. So
yeah, that's wild. Now, there's probably a bunch of stories you heard even before you moved here. Were there any that stuck out to you about the previous owner telling you, or lore that you heard?
It was not really something I investigated beforehand. I didn't do a lot. We were going to go eat at this place. The name of the house is The Grove, and it's named for the grove of native Texas pecan trees that surround the house. And so the restaurant, it's always been called The Grove. I think probably the original guy that built it, Frank Stilley, I think that people said, well, where'd Frank build his house? This is back in 1861. Oh, he built it in that grove of pecan trees. We still live at the Grove, so it's always been called the Grove. And then the restaurant that was here in the 90s was called the Grove as well. And we had come to Jefferson on one of our trips just to get out of the Dallas area, and we were going to eat here. And we pulled up in front, and there's a for sale sign out front. And I was like, oh, man. Yeah. But we stood there and looked at it, and something about the house was just speaking to us. I mean, it's like, there's something that's kind of cool here. So we left. Next time we came back, we're like, well, why don't we call that real estate agent and just look at it? And we did. And then we spent a full year trying to talk ourselves out of it. And we kept getting signs. I'm a big believer in signs. And we were getting signs about, you guys got to get to the Grove. And so we ended up, after a year, we bought it. And then I started hearing stories from around town. When it was a restaurant, you had a lot of people have things happen here. We started doing the tours kind of out of necessity because the house had gotten so much notoriety over the years that we'd just be at home and we'd hear on the door, yeah, can we come see your house? And, it just made it easier to go, okay, let's just do a weekend tour, and that'll give people who want to see it a chance to see it, and it'll make our life a lot easier. So, but then I started hearing all these stories, and the owner that bought the house in 1885, his name was Charlie Young, and he had somebody from his family living in the house almost 100 years. He bought it with his wife, Daphne. Then when he died in the 30s, he left it to his daughter, Louise. She continued to live here until her death in 1983. So 98 years they had somebody living here. And Charlie keeps showing up. I've never seen him, ever. And that makes me so mad. Like, I sometimes like, Charlie, would you please come on here? But the lady, her name was actually Grove as well, Lucille Grove. She said that she was in bed one night, and she was laying there and she was reading in bed, and it got real cold. And she's like, oh, this is weird. And she looked up, and there's this very distinguished looking black man, in a suit, standing in the corner of the room. And she says, he was a stranger. I'd never seen him before in my life. Why didn't I start screaming and, grab the phone and dial 911? She said, but there was something so peaceful about it that I just kind of shut my eyes and laid down and went to sleep and never saw him again. And to me, that was such an endorsement of the fact that, yeah, this isn't a bad, evil, scary thing. And I think Charlie just likes to come back because he has good memories of the house, And a lot of our guests have seen him. He just doesn't come back for me.
Too funny. So what have you seen? Have you seen much?
We have all kind of things happen. The very first thing that happened, the weekend that we first took possession of the house, we were living in Garland, so we'd packed a bunch of stuff up that we'd need, pillows and, sheets and whatever we need just to get through the weekend. And we took 2 cars because we had a lot of stuff to haul down here. And I got here before Tammy did. So I was bringing stuff in, and I started unpacking it and going through it. And then in the hallway, I heard what sounded like, to me, if you took 2 Walmart sacks, plastic bags, and just rubbed them against each other. Shh, 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 shh. And I thought, oh, Tammy must be carrying a bunch of sacks in. So I said, I'm in here, baby, in here. And she didn't say anything. And so I stood up and I looked down the hall. She's not there. I look out. There's nobody except my car here. And then I was talking to somebody else that has an old antebellum home. And I said, that's the first thing that happened. And they said, oh, yeah, we get that too. They used to wear the old hoop skirts, and that's the sound they would make when they walk. I was like, oh, cool. I heard that and I had no idea that's what I was hearing. But, and we hear footsteps, we hear music sometimes, people talking. When we were, the house had been sitting empty for a number of years when we bought it, so we had a lot of work to do. And it was a big family thing. My family and Tammy's family both still live in Hooks, about an hour away. So they would come down on weekends and would all work on the house together, which was a really neat bonding experience. I would give nothing for those times. They were so wonderful, so magical, just being around both of our parents and just spending that time together. But my dad, he kind of poo-pooed the whole idea of ghosts from the start. He's like, yeah, right, yeah, that's nonsense. And so we had basically a workshop set up on the front porch. We had a table saw out there. And so we're working in the kitchen, and I said, okay, I need a 2x4, 4 feet. And Dad was like, well, I'm not doing anything. Let me go cut it for you. Well, he disappears, and he comes back just like a minute later, looks around, said, "You okay?" He goes, "I'm okay." He went back, came back with a 2x4 later. And years later, he said, I need to tell you something. And I said, "What's that?" He goes, "Well, when I was walking back up front to go outside and cut that piece of wood," he said, "there were people in the parlor," which is where we are today, talking. He said, "I was hearing a conversation." And he said, my thought was, oh, okay, somehow y'all beat me up here. And he said, I walked into the front of the house and the parlor's empty. He said, I had to go all the way back just to make sure y'all were all still back there. And you were. He said, but somebody was talking up front that day. And I was like, yeah, we get that. So I don't know that made him a believer, but it made him it kind of opened the door a little bit that, okay, maybe there's more to this world than we really believe. One of the things we have is a lady in a white dress that walks through the house. And that has gone back through several owners. And I guess one of the first experiences with her that Patrick had, the restaurant guy, they were doing, dinner theater here at the house when they had a restaurant here, and the kind of thing where you do a play while you're serving the meal. And they were rehearsing the play. It was a full dress rehearsal of an old-fashioned play called Gaslight. So the lighting technician had her board set up on the front porch, and the blinds were open so that she could look in through the window and work the lights as the play progressed, but her board wouldn't take up space in the dining room. So as she's going through the play and working the lights, she happens to look over to the right side of the house, and there's a lady in a long white dress walking beside the house. Well, looked as real as you and me. And so she assumed it was one of the actresses, so she called it to her. She said, hey, there's no door on that side of the house. You're going the wrong way. The woman just kept walking. She thought, that's weird. So she called to her again. She said, lady, I'm telling you, you're going the wrong way. The woman just kept walking. So the actress walked over to the railing, leaned over, tried to get this lady's attention. Like, I'm trying to tell you. And about that time, the woman took a left and stepped up through a wall of the house. Well, meanwhile, they were in this full dress rehearsal for this play, and there was a lady on the landing of the staircase getting ready to make her grand entrance. And she's up there. She happens to look into the game room, or what is now our game room, and saw a lady walking across it in a long white dress. She crossed the stairwell in front of her, and she thought she knew everybody in the play, but here was a stranger. So as she went by, the lady said, excuse me, the restaurant's closed. You're not supposed to be here. Woman just ignored her, went into the far room. And the actress thought, man, how rude. So she goes down the stairs, goes into the far room to find out who this is, gets in there, and the room is empty. There's no other way in or out of that room, so she realized what she must have seen. She goes running back up front here where everybody else was. You're not going to believe what I just saw. You're not going to believe what I just saw. At the same time, that lighting tech from the front porch comes bursting through the front door. You're not going to believe what I just saw. You're not going to believe what I just saw. And they saw two halves of the same thing. They saw a lady walk beside the house, step up through an outside wall, and step up into the house here, and then walk across the side of, or the width of the house, I should say. And so as I started doing research on the house, I found out that where she's stepping up used to be the back of the house. It used to be a back porch. And I was like, okay, so she's not stepping up through a wall, which made no sense to me. She's stepping up onto a back porch and coming through a door that would have been in the back wall of the house and walking across to what would have been the children's bedroom. And if that's the case, the only person it could be is the original lady of the house, Minerva Stilley. She and her husband Frank built the house in 1861. They also made that addition to the house, took the back porch off, and they had two sons, no daughters. She is the only woman that would remember the house in that configuration. So it's almost got to be her. And occasionally you'll be in the back of the house and just looking up toward the front, and the lady goes by in a dress. And, now I don't even come up here anymore, but it's always, now she's like, okay, it was her again. We've had friends that have seen her. We've had, during the restaurant days, Patrick said a lot of people would see her. No particular schedule. It doesn't happen at any certain time. It's just a right place, right time kind of thing.
Now, do you know how that lady died?
She died, I don't know the illness, but she took ill and she died here in the house. And there's some things that happened during Reconstruction here in Jefferson. Some bad things. Reconstruction was a bad time,
Yeah, can you tell me about that?
Well, there was about maybe 3 blocks from here was the city jail. They called it the Calaboose. And they had a carpetbagger come to town. And he was trying to rally all the freed slaves and say, hey, you need to vote like we tell you to, you need to vote like we're your friends, you vote with us. And they were trying to get him power and everything. So he had a big political meeting with a lot of the freedmen, and he had two people that had come down with him, two African-American gentlemen that had come down with him. No, I take that back, there was four. And so the sheriff comes up afterwards and says, dude, you've made a lot of people here in town upset, because there was still a lot of racial tension back then. He said, I can't protect you unless, come spend the night in the jail. And that way I can have my men there, and we can at least protect you, because you could be in trouble. So his four freedmen friends and himself, they went and they took cells, and they weren't locked or anything. But in the middle of the night, all these riders show up on horseback with hoods on. And they're demanding to get these four freedmen and a carpetbagger guy. And the police just basically run. They're like, we can't, we're outnumbered. We got to get out. So they can't get the carpetbagger guy to come out of the cell, so they shoot him through the bars. They take the four freedmen, they're going to take them to the end of Mosley Street, the west end of it. And there was a natural springs area called Sulphur Springs. It has nothing to do with the town of Sulphur Springs. That was just a sulfuric type spring that was down there. They were going to take them down there and hang them. And they kept putting up a struggle. And as they were coming down Mosley Street, according to the Federal Army, who had a trial about this later, as they were going by, Mr. Stilley, the guy that built our house, he went out and he said, could y'all hold it down? I don't know what you're doing, but I've got a sick woman in here. And that was his wife, Minerva. And whatever that sickness was, she died in the house. And the two of the freedmen escaped, as it turns out. And they never did hang anybody. They shot the other two. And it turned into a big trial called the Stockade Incident here in Jefferson. Really kind of a high water mark of problems here in town during Reconstruction. But the thing that was valuable to me was to see in the testimony of the people who were saying that, yeah, Mr. Stilley came out and, he said his wife was sick, so I can pinpoint about when that was. So she died and he put the house up for sale. He moved further out west and settled in Weatherford, Texas. But you can't go there anymore because they built Highway 59, which they, got rid of anything like that, so.
Yeah, so the spring doesn't exist.
The spring doesn't exist. Oh, I don't. It may be running underground, going somewhere nowadays.
Gotcha.
I think you can't just turn the spring off. But yeah, as far as the area where it was, it's completely.
Yeah. And so, what was the ruling of the trial? Do you know?
Yeah, they arrested dozens of men, and they had to build a stockade down by the river to keep them in. And when it was all said and done, I think they only convicted 3 of them. And they fled, and after a few years came back to town. So the whole thing was just,
So the KKK, is that what they were?
They called themselves the Knights of the Rising Sun.
Okay.
Same thing. I mean, it's horrible, but that existed back then,
And they shot 2 black men and 2 got away?
And 2 got away.
Gotcha. And this was the late 1800s?
This would be late 1860s.
Gotcha. So is there any other reason? Do you think that has something to do with some of the hyper spiritual climate here, if that's what you would call it, or is there something else?
It's amazing. We bought the Grove, and then of course I'd already been writing about haunted places, which is a cool part of my job. I love the history part. I love doing research. But the haunted places are really fun, and I like staying in haunted hotels and going to eat at haunted restaurants because they're always old and have a lot of character, and it's not like just going into a chain restaurant that every place looks the same as the other. It's always unique and individual. But we bought the Grove, and people found out I was writing about the supernatural, and so that kind of, in their mind, said, okay, this guy's not going to think I'm crazy. So fast forward to where we are now, there's probably not a building downstairs. There's probably not a building downtown where I haven't had somebody that owns one of the shops pull me aside and go, look, I've got to tell you something, but you can't tell anybody. And I was like, I'm cool, no problem. And so there's a lot of supernatural stuff that happens here in Jefferson. I don't know what I think about. I don't believe the old adage of, they're stuck here and can't get to the other side. I have to believe God is on the throne. He's not going to let anybody get stuck anywhere, but I believe that they may have the ability to come back and visit places, people, or things that were important to them in life. And here in Jefferson, this was one of the two big entry ports into Texas. The other was Galveston. We were one of the largest cities in Texas back in the 1800s. And so you had all these people coming to Texas to make their fortune and start a new life. And you had all these bandits and robbers and murderers and things. They're fleeing to Texas where, there's not as much jurisdiction for where they committed their crimes. And so you had good people coming in and, business owners. So all this emotion was centered around this town. And the Civil War never got here, thankfully, or all this would have been gone. All these buildings would have been burned. But you have all this emotion left behind, which I think is kind of the catalyst that makes all this still go on to this day.
Interesting. So your theory is they're just the souls or spirits of people who died?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
After 23 years of living at the Grove, there's nobody stuck here. There's nobody here all the time. It's more like I say, people coming back to visit. And if you tour, if you tour the Myrtles, we toured the Myrtles, and we were down there for a while and had nothing happen. They go, yeah, it's just being at the right place at the right time. I'm like, I know exactly what you're talking about.
And so you say it's very rare that anything's ever been aggressive towards you or your wife. Huh?
Not in this house, ever. Now, there have been people scared away, but we're very sensitive to the fact that, this house has been here for, over 160 years. Is that right? And so that, if we're leaving to go somewhere, we talk to the house. We're like, hey, we're going to be gone for 3 days. And somebody's going to come over and feed the cat, and and we talk to it just like we're talking to a person. But one time we neglected to do that, and we had one of Tammy's students coming over. We had a basset hound at the time, and he was going to come feed the basset hound. And so, when we got back, I was settling up with him, paying him for coming over and doing that for us. And I said, "Was everything okay?" He goes, "Man, every time I walk through your house, it's like 1,000 people staring at me." He said, "I felt horrible." And I was like, oh, yeah, we didn't tell anybody you were coming. So we hadn't asked the question everybody always asks me.
What's that?
Where am I going to come back?
Oh.
The answer is the front porch. I love sitting on the front porch of the Grove. If you go out there first thing in the morning, even if it's summer day, when it's still kind of cool, you get the fan blowing, get out there and have a cup of coffee. There's no better way, because we live on a pretty rural part of town here. And, the river's 200 yards, so we get a lot of wildlife, a lot of birds. But no better way to get your day organized, to get your thoughts together, just sit there and have a cup of coffee. So, yeah, whoever owns the Grove 100 years from now is going to talk about the front porch ghost. And you walk up there first thing in the morning and there's a smell of coffee in the air. That'll be me.
Right. That's wild.
Because I am going to come back and make sure things are running the way I want them to.
Yeah. Do you have any thoughts on demons, angels?
Certainly I believe in angels, so I have to believe in demons. But those are different beings. The essence of who we are, spirit, if you will. We're just using this body temporarily. We're going to go on, and I don't know what all we go into. And you and I had a brief conversation about religion before, and I'm a Christian, but organized religion really bothers me. And there's so much hate in it today. We got to hate them gays. It's like, why? Just go away. Let everybody be themselves, man. But it's like this crusade of hatred that's come across the Christian world now, and I don't like that. You can't use the word God and hate in the same sentence, because God is love. So, I'm a Christian and I follow the teachings of Christ, and I try my best to emulate how He would do things. But yeah, so I don't go to church because they're all different, and everybody says, well, mine is right. Y'all are all going to hell. Oh, mine is right, and y'all are all going to hell. Well, I've got a good friend that's Catholic, and she has to go to confession, and this dude tells her how to make God happy. You have to say 12 Hail Marys, and God bless her, that's what she believes. I respect that. That doesn't fit in with me, though, so I'm more on a spiritual path. But I have no question in my mind that angels are real. A family member had a experience with an angelic being that removes any sort of doubt in my mind. So I know angels are around, and I suspect we see them a lot more than we know.
I was wondering if your lighter was moved by one, you know?
You know, it could be.
Yeah.
It could be.
What would have happened if you lit that?
Oh, you know, I'd be dead. That was a stupid thought. It was the dumbest thought I've ever had. And, you know, I know people are going to watch this and go, you idiot. Yes, I own it. I am an idiot. I'm firmly willing to stand up and say, yeah, it's the dumbest thought I ever had.
Yeah. Is your family's incident with the angel, is that something worth telling? Or?
So I have an aunt that I'm very, very close to. She was like a second mother to me. And she lived in Azle, I guess, north of Fort Worth. And her husband, she and her husband were both retired. And they got up one morning and they were sitting drinking coffee and sitting on the couch, and he stood up and then boom, just fell over. I guess he had a massive heart attack. So she immediately calls 911 and she starts trying to do CPR, and the ambulance shows up and they come in and they're like, we're gonna take him. And one of the neighbors walked over, is everything okay? And one of the ambulance people said, she can't ride with us. We're going to be working on him. So could you take her to the hospital? And she was, yeah, absolutely. So the ambulance took off and she said, let me get my car. So they're not too far behind them. They get to the hospital. She drops my aunt off the sidewalk and says, I'm not familiar with this hospital, but just stand right here. Let me park the car and then we'll go figure out where emergency is, where the ER is. And so my aunt's standing there and a girl walks up to her. And she's wearing a white t-shirt and jeans. And the girl says, I'm going to help you. Follow me. And my aunt's like, all right. So they go into the hospital, and she is taking her through back corridors and places where, public's not supposed to go. It's shortcutting, and they get to the ER, and the girl walks up to the desk and says, this is a lady whose husband just got brought in. And the woman said, oh, okay, and gets a clipboard and hands it to my aunt and says, you need to start filling this out. And my aunt's standing there, and she turns around to say thank you, and the girl's nowhere to be seen. And she asked the lady, she said, did you see where that girl went? And the lady goes, what girl? Like, the one that came in with me. You came in by yourself. Give me a different explanation for that.
That's incredible. Yeah, wow. That's a really cool story.
Yeah, it is. And to me, it's a comforting one, because I hope that, I hope that angels are watching over me, and I could use all the help I can get.
Same here. So we talk about the angelic encounters. Any demonic encounters?
Not that I have been aware of. In my mind, it's like, I'm a child of God, I'm a Christian. I don't think a demon can touch me. And I don't fear them, and I certainly don't go seeking them out, trying to find them or anything like that. But a lot of that stuff, there's a lot of evil in the world. And I don't think that demons are always like the exorcist, I think it's a lot of causing behavior that causes more hatred and causes more, because that's what they're trying to do, is to, God is love. They want to, let's get everybody hating each other and jealous of each other and, mean. And I think trying to foster that is probably enough on their plate. And I think sometimes they do a really good job of it.
Right. Awesome. And where can people find you, or how can they find information about tours or books and stuff?
Easiest thing is just to Google Grove and Jefferson, and our website shows up. It's thegrove-jefferson.com, because the Grove was long taken when we bought the house, but it's thegrove-jefferson.com, and it's got information about our tours. It's got some ghost stories. We've been on any number of TV shows, and I'm really careful about those. I don't want to get something bad associated with the house. Like we had, I had a producer call me up, hey, we want to come film, and he had read about the lady in white that I told you about earlier. And we have, back in 1877, a murder was committed here in Jefferson. A young lady named Diamond Bessie was her nickname. And she was allegedly murdered by her husband. I think there's no question about it. They were visitors to town. But anyway, it's a famous part of Jefferson's history. So this producer said, yeah, we want to recreate the lady in white thing. And I was like, all right, that's cool. He goes, yeah, we're going to say she's Diamond Bessie. I was like, well, she's not Diamond Bessie. I wrote a book about Diamond Bessie. Diamond Bessie never came in this house. She never walked in this neighborhood. She was here for 3 days and got killed. And he's like, yeah, well, still that makes it more interesting. I was like, but there's too many stories about the house that are interesting. You don't have to make up anything. You don't want to lie. And go, I'd never lie. I wouldn't lie at all. And I'm like, well, that's what you just got through telling me you were going to do. So we're very careful, and we don't let paranormal investigation groups in anymore. We've put a moratorium on that just because we had some bad experiences. I try to protect the house.
Yeah.
I really.
Were they like just making stuff up, the paranormal ones?
Oh, yelling at, trying to, we're going to yell, we're going to get these spirits mad so they'll manifest. I was like, no, these are kind of my friends, There was another place here in town that I will safeguard the identity of, but it was a house that they let a paranormal investigation group come in, and they weren't really paying attention. They were like, hey, whatever you want to do. And in the course of things, they decided that they weren't getting supernatural spirit activity, they were getting demonic activity. So they go and pound on the door of the local priest at the local Catholic church and drag him out, and they're trying to talk him into doing an exorcism, which you can't just do a willy-nilly exorcism. There's people in the church trained to do that. And he's like, no, I can bless the house. But, and they actually go to that church and like, what's going on? And they threw him out, so it's, the popularity of the TV shows makes everybody want to get that edge, and that's not what we're about at all. I want to honor the people that lived here before us. I hope the people that come after us will, honor our memory as well. So when we do our tours, it's not just ghost stories. About half of it is the history of the house and the people who came before us. I mean, Charlie Young was a freed slave. He was actually somebody's property, and he rose to a place of prominence here in Jefferson. That's pretty amazing. That's worth, honoring his memory of, so.
Did he have a good death?
He did. He died here in the house as an old man. And I don't know, again, what the exact cause of death was. He got ill, but he cut hair. He was a barber, and he cut hair in Jefferson, but he also was a property owner. And so he would go to work every day wearing a 3-piece suit, very formal. And he charged 3 times what any other barber did in Marion County. So only the best men in town could afford to have their hair cut by Mr. Charlie. It was really a status thing. So he was well respected, well liked. Patrick, the restaurant guy, said at one time he had a letter, and he has no idea what happened to it, but the local bank, back when there was the Depression and bank runs and things like that, they sent out a few letters to their most prominent people, and one of them went to Charlie saying, your money's secure, everything's safe, don't worry. And so he was very well respected. And back in those days, there was segregation even in death. So he helped to pay for the African American cemetery that was back in those days. And so we still have some receipts when they were paying him back a dollar or two at a time, Yeah. So he was a very prominent citizen. And I think his memory needs to be respected. And so I try to do that with all of the former owners.
Interesting. Aside for just paranormal stuff, is there any sensational stories that people like to tell about Jefferson?
Oh gosh, the Diamond Bessie murder, that happened in 1877, and it was we could do an hour just on that.
Yeah. Wow.
But this was in 1877, and train comes up to the station, and the inns here in Jefferson, they would put a buckboard out there and go meet the train. So as people are getting off the train, they're like, hey, come stay with us, and I'll get your luggage, we'll take you. And so a buckboard from the Brooks house met this couple coming, and she's got diamonds and, all this jewelry all over, and he's well-dressed, very obviously well-to-do people. And they go to the Brooks house, and he signs in as A. Monroe and wife. So they're seen all over town for the next couple of days. And then he goes and he gets a picnic lunch from Enrique's restaurant down on Dallas Street. At the time, it's of course no longer there, but he packs some picnic lunch with some fried chicken, a couple of bottles of beer, other things. So their last scene going across the bridge over the Big Cypress Bayou, and sometime later he's seen coming back by himself, and he gets back to the inn, and they're like, where's your wife? Oh, she's across the bayou with friends. Somebody else asks, and he'll say, oh, she's at a restaurant. She's having some dinner. And then he didn't come out of his room the next day, but there's no trains out of town. The next train was Monday morning. And so on Monday morning, he gets over there to the train station with his luggage and her luggage, but she's not there. He gets on the train and leaves town. So her body's discovered 2 weeks later, shot in the left temple. And she's, on a log. He apparently just shot her and left her there. He took all of her jewelry was gone though. In fact, at the trial, one of the ladies that was a maid at the Brooks house testified that when he came back, he was wearing 2 of the rings that she had on. And he was seen around town with those. Well, anyway, the police started back checking. They found that he was actually Abe Rothschild from the Rothschild Diamond family. And so they went and got him, brought him back. When they found him in Cincinnati, he had already tried to commit suicide. He tried to shoot himself in the head, but the bullet hit a bone and ricocheted out his eye. And so he had blinded himself in one eye, but he had to wear a patch the rest of the time. But he was found guilty. They got off of that on a technicality. Then he was tried and found not guilty, and there was a lot of rumors about paying off the jury and things like that. And he was free, but he had a horrible rest of his life. He was a con man. The family disowned him. He was in jail. And the one thing I couldn't find in the book to end it was where he's buried. So I think he just probably ended up in an alley somewhere. Somebody rolled him into a pauper's grave or something. But yeah, his whole life nosedived after that. But Bessie is still remembered and still honored here in town.
What was the motive?
The reason that most people believe that he killed her was it was going to come out in the trial that she was with child. And she was a prostitute. He picked her up. He was a drummer, which is what they called a salesman in those days. And he was traveling around by train, going to different stores in different cities, trying to place their diamonds in there, their diamond rings and brooches and stuff. So he had been on the road for some time, and he hooked up with her. He met her in a brothel. And so then, if you get further into it, he was like pimping her out. And, but they did get married, and they got arrested. Neither one of them were great people. They got arrested one time. They were like in a physical fist fight, both of them drunk off their, bottoms in the middle of the street. So, these weren't the greatest people in the world. But anyway, she was pregnant. He couldn't go home and tell his parents, hey, the heir to the Rothschild diamond fortune is going to be birthed by a prostitute I picked up along the way. So that seems to be the motive. But she was found without any money. He had taken all of her jewels, so the town took up a collection, bought her a plot out in the cemetery, in Oakwood Cemetery, paid to have her buried there, give her a Christian burial. And then years later, I think back in the 30s, somebody had a headstone made, and it just appeared out there one night. So, and the garden club put a fence around it, and like I say, now they keep it up, and it is a tourist attraction, but it seems to be very respectful. I just don't see people trashing it or doing anything bad. They love the story, and they, it's kind of got a romantic side to it. And here she was killed, and the whole town embraces her now. So they love to go out there and see the grave and leave a little token or something like that.
It reminds me a tiny bit of one of my favorite westerns, Unforgiven.
Oh yeah.
Now, why did they call her Diamond Bessie?
She would take diamonds in trade for her services as a prostitute, and which made her really want to hook up with this guy who's a diamond salesman, because he could give her a supply, So that's a big part of our history there that's still carried forward. Supposedly, the railroad baron Jay Gould cursed the town. He wanted to, we were a steamboat town, and he wanted to marry his railroad to the steamboat trade, as the story goes. So he came to try to sell the founding fathers on, hey, y'all need to get my railroad in here. And they were like, railroad? Yeah, that's a flash in the pan. No, steamboats, that's the future. And he got mad, and as the story goes, stood in one of our streets and shook his fist in the air and said, bats will roost in your belfry and grass will grow in your street. The Jefferson's going to dry up and die. And of course it didn't. We're doing quite well now, but kind of as a payback, we bought his, he had a very plush, opulent railroad car he traveled in, and it's now downtown. You can tour it. So, we got that. It's like, thumbing our nose at Jay Gould.
Sorry, I'm not familiar with that word. You said bats in their what?
Belfry.
Belfry, what is that?
Belfry, like a steeple or something like
gotcha,
that.
Gotcha. Okay. where can we find your books?
If you go onto the website, thegrove-jefferson.com, I've got a listing of a lot of my books there that you can see.
Awesome.
So, yeah,
Awesome.
I try to be everywhere.
Yeah. Well, this has been incredible. Thanks so much for sharing your stories.
It's my pleasure.
I lived an hour and a half in here. I'd never heard of Jefferson, and I looked up the Grove and some of the sources you talked about, like the Bigfoot stuff. I learned, I did a little research. I'm like, what? It's the Bigfoot capital of the world?
Yeah.
Or Texas?
Oh, Texas, yeah.
Yeah, wild.
It is, and we have a UFO conference here in town.
Oh, dang. Okay.
Yeah, so there's...
My father-in-law is a big UFO guy, so...
I saw one on my back porch.
Did you?
Well, it wasn't on my back porch. I was on my back porch, and I looked up, and it was a sphere. It wasn't a flying saucer. It was just a big silver sphere, and it was only there for a second. It was moving, and then I wrote a book called Close Encounters of the Texas Kind, where I did a history of UFO sightings in Texas, and I put mine in there as well.
Yeah.
Well, I'm at that conference, like a year later, and one of my friends comes up and goes, "Oh, you wrote a UFO book?" And I was like, "Yeah, I did." He goes, "Yeah, I've seen one of those." I said, "Really? Tell me about it." He goes, "Well, it wasn't a saucer. It was this big round silver thing. It was moving fast, and it was in daylight." And I was like, "You're describing exactly. I wrote about it. Look in this chapter right here." And then not long after that, the Army released, or the military, I should say. I don't know if it was Air Force or Army, but they had some drone footage of over in Iraq, I think, and it picked up this big silver thing moving really fast. Like, we don't know what this is. It's outperforming our drones. We can't keep up with it.
Wow.
So there's something there too. I've just come to the point in my life where I think there's so much more beyond what we think we know. And it doesn't make it bad, and it doesn't make it evil. There's things that we don't understand, and some of them maybe that we're not capable of understanding. It all sounds crazy until it's not anymore.
Yeah.
But Christ talked about ghosts twice. He's walking across the water, and they're like, a ghost, a ghost. He's like, I'm not a ghost. Ghosts don't have form. He didn't say, there's no such thing, and that's evil, by the way, and shut up about that. No, he said, no, ghosts don't have form. I've got form. Come look at me. Same thing after the resurrection. They're like, it's the ghost of Jesus. Like, I'm not a ghost. Come here, come touch me. You can, put your hand in a wound in my side. So neither time did he rebuke them about, there's no such thing as ghosts. He actually went to describe a spirit. I wrote a book called The Light at the Top of the Mountain, and it's about ghosts in the Bible. And there's a lot of spirits that come. Who was it that the witch of Endor summoned back?
Samuel.
Samuel. And the king wants to talk to him, and she brings him forward, and Samuel goes, "What are you doing? I'm having a good time over there. Why are you calling me back?" And it says, "This is Samuel." And if you go and read different commentaries, they go, "Well, it wasn't really him," or, "Well, maybe it was a demon trying to." No, it actually says it was. So either that's the one lie in the Bible, or it was really him.
Right. And it freaked her out, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I wonder why she was freaked out.
It worked.
Yeah, maybe she was a charlatan.
And a lot of those people are, but there's a few that, wow,
I've heard stories where people were trying to prove that healing doesn't exist anymore, so they go around preaching and they pray for people thinking they're going to fool everybody, and people get healed. It's like, it worked.
Well, that's the exact plot of the movie with Steve Martin. He was a tent revival preacher. Yeah, what was the name of that movie?
I haven't heard of that.
It's awesome, and a lot of people don't like it because he is a complete and total charlatan. Yeah. And he's trying to bilk everybody. He's trying to make money. What happens when it turns out that it's real? Yeah. Leap of Faith is the name of the movie. And in the end of it, you're like, oh, he gets as surprised as everybody else.
That's a cool movie right there.
I wrote a book. Granddad wrote a book on the 23rd Psalm. That was his favorite passage in the Bible. And he never got it published traditionally. Yeah. So that's kind of what I do for a living. So I took his book on the 23rd Psalm, all the theologies Granddad's, and I put family stories with it that kind of illustrate some. So I interviewed everybody in our family, and I was very careful to not go too far off of his, what he was, because this is his theology here, and I'm going to see him again, and I don't want his first words to be, "What did you do to my book?" So I was being very careful. But there was a story in our family. He was a preacher in a little town called Maud, from about 30 minutes from here, and it's a small little town. And so he was a preacher at a church there, and one of his guys, in his congregation came to visit, and it's like, they called him Brother Kirk. His name was Kirkendall. Like, Brother Kirk, man, I've been struggling. I've been trying to find the job, and I've got a job interview, but I don't have a shirt to wear. Do you have a shirt I could borrow? And so Granddad said, yeah, absolutely. He went and he got his best shirt. He brought it back and he said, keep it, it's yours, because if you get the job, which I think you will, you're going to need something to wear. So my grandmother got all upset. What are you going? We got plenty of old ratty shirts. Why don't you give him one of those? It would have been better than what he's got. Granddad's like, no, I got to give the best. And so like a couple of weeks later, one of the other congregation members comes to see Granddad, and he's very well off. He, is doing really well for himself. And he goes, I've been so blessed. I feel like I need to get some of it back. So I'm going to take you shopping and buy you 2 new shirts. And he did. Brought him 2 brand new shirts. I'm a big believer in what you put out there, you get back.
Right,
and any world religion across the board has that concept. Karma. Wicca has the rule of 3. Whatever you put out is going to come back at you 3 times. Yeah, and if it's goodness, you're going to get that blessing. If it's bad, you're going to, But every religion has some, what goes around comes around. You reap what you sow. It's for everybody in the world to have that idea. It's got to be something to it. Yeah.
I see all these people looting stores and stealing and stuff, and man, it's not helping you. It's going to come back. It might be 5 years later, it might be 10 years later, but you're going to get it. And
your sins will find you out.
Okay, unless you got anything else, let's wrap this up.
Well, cool. I appreciate it. I've enjoyed visiting.
Yeah.
This has been less like filming an interview and more like just visiting with a friend.
After finally finding my keys, misplaced by my stepson, we headed back. My mind was buzzing with questions about ghosts. The very next day, I happened to listen to an episode of the Confessionals podcast on the subject. The guest admitted he wasn't entirely what to make of ghosts either, but from his experience, most friendly hauntings eventually turn malevolent. For Mitchel's sake, I hope his never does. Thanks for watching, and if you haven't, hit subscribe.